Yeah, good evening to all of you. First, let me apologize for the late start of our class. I just had pardon? No, anyone who commits a mistake should always apologize, right? I just had to go urgently to meet one of my friends who is in ICU, so I got late there. So that was the reason why I got late. Right. So let us come back and look at what we are discussing. I hope everyone had come, or some people have already left, thinking that class will be late. Pardon? Holi is coming. Okay. It's not a holy day, it is holiday. Right. Now we need some kind of excuse to celebrate. In India, we always require some kind of excuses to celebrate. Can you hear me? Yes. Online, I think. Is it fine? Right. So let us proceed and look at what we were discussing in our previous class. If you remember, we were talking about the features of constitutionalism. We said that India has adopted this constitution for the simple reason that we wanted to have an effective functioning of our democratic systems. Because India did not have any experience with democracy for such a long period of time in its entire history. So it was felt that if we have a written constitution, it would be helpful for us to have an effective functioning of our parliamentary democracy also. Our constitutional forefathers had spent almost 3 years to come out with the constitution, 2 hours, 11 months, and what is it, mobile? See, mobile phones in our classroom are allowed to ring, provided they have good ringtones. And I will decide what is a good ringtone. Right? And any other thing will be capital punishment. Right? So make sure that you have good ringtones, and you have to make sure that the ringtones should be likable to me also. And there is no criteria also. So coming back here, what we have said is that our constitutional forefathers, they have taken 3 years, and they had come out with, as we discussed, some of the important features of our constitution. First one we have said is a written constitution, then parliamentary form of democracy, then federal form of government, then fundamental rights, then directive principles of state policy, and then independence of our judiciary, judicial review, then secularism, and then we can also add local self-governments. So these are all some of the features of our constitution, important features of our constitution. We will take some few points, notes for all those features. As we proceed, we will be discussing all of them as part of our syllabus. Then we were also, in our previous class, we were also talking about this concept called constitutionalism. If I am not wrong, this is what we have mentioned in our previous class. We said that our entire constitution, if our entire syllabus of a constitution, polity and governance can be described only in one single word, that is constitutionalism. Right? Almost for every question, whenever we have any kind of doubt, what we will do? We will write constitutionalism. Then the examiner will have tears in his eyes looking at your intelligence. Out of 10 marks, he will give you 20 marks. Right? So that is the reason why this the topic constitutionalism becomes very, very important. In our prelims also, almost every year, 1 or 2 questions are always asked about constitutionalism, including last year also they have asked. So now, as we stopped in our last class, what exactly is this constitutionalism, and why do we need a constitutionalism, and what are the important facets of constitutionalism, and more importantly, whether we have a constitutionalism in the functioning of our democracy or not. These are all the things let us now look at. As we keep on saying, our entire polity is about having a conceptual clarity. That is the reason why we will be proceeding at a very slow and steady level, and make sure that understand each and every concept. So what we have mentioned, if you remember, is that the relation between the state and the citizens, we called it as a 2-person zero-sum game. We call it as 2-person zero-sum game. What do we mean by that? It means that the state can acquire more powers only at the cost of the freedoms and the rights of the citizens. Only at the cost of the freedoms and rights of the citizens. When a state comes out with any legislation, automatically it takes away the freedoms of the citizens. It takes away the rights of the citizens. Any legislation, you name it. As I said, income tax laws are there. What does income tax law say? You have to pay a portion of your income as a tax. We have this UAPA legislation, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, wherein the government can arrest you, government can declare you as a terrorist, and then you have to prove yourself that you are an innocent person. Preventive detention is there. The government believes that you can be causing harm to the functioning of the society, and from the point of view of law and order, the government can arrest you, saying that you have been arrested under this Preventive Detention Act. So at the end of the day, as we said, this relationship is always what is called a 2-person zero-sum game. One of the most famous British political philosophers, Thomas Hobbes, is a very popular British political philosopher. He was also, you will study about him in your ethics paper also. Almost every paper is interlinked in our GS. And you will be studying about him in your ethics paper also. And what he has said, he said that the state can easily become a Leviathan. What is a Leviathan? In Greek mythology, this is an animal which has the ability to eat its own creation. It can eat its own creator, right? It can eat its own creator. What does it mean? Since we don't know anything about Greek mythology, let us try to understand this, right? Let us try to understand this from Hindu mythology. You must have heard about a demon called Bhashmasur, right? What is so unique about him? His name is Bhashmasur. Asur means demon, devil. Bhashma means ashes. He gets a boon from Lord Shiva that if he puts his hand on the head of any person, that person would turn into ashes. That is the reason why he is called Bhashmasur, right? So he wanted to check whether the boon given by Lord Shiva is real or not, and he could not see anyone in front of him, and he says that let me put my hand on your head only, on the head of Lord Shiva only, right? That is when the mythology says that Vishnu comes to the rescue of Lord Shiva. Vishnu takes up the form of Mohini, and this Mohini, she will make sure that he puts his hand on his head only. Then he would turn into ashes. So why we are talking about this is because this Leviathan, what we say is that the state can become easily a Leviathan. Instead, the state, according to Thomas Hobbes, it has come into existence. The state has come into existence to maximize welfare of people. To maximize welfare of people. If you go back, that is what we have studied. What is the natural tendency of any society? Is to move towards entropy. That is the reason why people have created this state. They said that please take care of our life. Please take care of our liberty. Please take care of our freedoms. And also work towards maximizing our welfare. And work towards maximizing our welfare. That is what the reason why this state had come into existence. The state had come into existence to ensure negative entropy. Positive entropy means destruction. It has come into existence to ensure negative entropy. So what Hobbes has said is that over a period of time, those who are part of the state, instead of working for the people, instead of working to maximize the welfare of people, they can work against the interests of the people. And those who are part of the state can acquire so much of power unto themselves that it can jeopardize the life of the people, welfare of the people, rights of the people and freedoms of the people. So what is required here is we cannot give absolute powers to the state. Why? Because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So there has to be some kind of limitations on the exercise of power by the organs of the state. And who imposes those limitations? How these limitations work? All this is part of what we call constitutionalism. Constitutionalism basically talks about limiting the powers of the state. Why? Because if any organ of the state is given absolute powers, it can result in dictatorship. For example, if you are giving maximum powers to the Prime Minister, what happens? The Prime Minister can become a dictator. Similarly, take the case of legislature. Our legislature has not defined their privileges. So they can have as many powers as they want. They can also become dictator. And judiciary, judiciary can easily acquire more powers unto themselves. They can also become dictator. So what we have to mention, what we have to make sure is that these organs of the state should never become dictatorial in their functioning. And how to ensure that these organs of the state would not become dictatorial in their functioning? By limiting the powers of these organs of the state. Limiting powers. So that none of them should have what we call absolute powers. They should never have absolute powers. Recently, if you happen to read the newspapers, there is so much of debate going on in the country regarding the powers of parliament vis-a-vis judiciary. Our vice president has said that in our country we have parliamentary sovereignty. He said that why judiciary is unnecessarily interfering. Why did the judiciary come out with the basic basic structure doctrine, which has limited the powers of our executive. So there is so much of controversy that is going on in the country. Obviously, that is why we say that we need constitutionalism. Why? Because we cannot give absolute powers to any organ of the state. For example, in our parliamentary democracy, we say that if the Prime Minister has a absolute majority in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, he can have more powers than the President of America. We say that American President is the most powerful person in the country, in the world, in terms of the powers that he has enjoyed. In our parliamentary democracy, if the Prime Minister has this kind of 2/3 majority, then he can amend any part of the constitution, including fundamental rights. And he can easily become dictator. So how to prevent this kind of dictatorship? That is where we need constitutionalism. That is the reason why our constitutional forefathers have given power to judiciary, saying that this judiciary is independent and it is given the power of what is called a judicial review. Article 13 of the Constitution says that judiciary has the power to declare any law passed by the parliament null and void if it violates the fundamental rights of the citizens. Similarly, the powers of judiciary can be limited by legislature and executive. The powers of executive can be limited by legislature. That is what we say inherent checks and balances, so that none of them can become sovereign. None of them can become dictatorial in their functioning. Please remember, as I keep on saying, this concept called constitutionalism defines the entire our constitution as well as polity. We have given discretionary powers to the president, we have given discretionary powers to the governors, we have given lot of powers to the prime minister, we also have given a good amount of powers to our parliament, and there is every possibility that they can misuse those powers. There is every probability. Why? Because wherever there is power, there is always scope for misuse of power. There is always scope for abuse of power. There is always scope for nepotism and favoritism. That is the reason why what we need is inherent checks and balances. Yesterday you must have seen Supreme Court had come out with a very good judgment regarding the appointment of election commission members. It has said that from now onwards this election commission members and chief election commissioner would be appointed only by a collegium consisting of say the prime minister, leader of opposition in Lok Sabha, and also chief justice of Supreme Court. That is what we say, ensuring checks and balances. And Supreme Court only 2 days back also had come out with a judgment regarding the relation between the governor and chief minister. If you have been reading the newspapers, you could see that in Punjab there is so much of conflict going on between the governor and chief minister. That is when judiciary has to interfere. Why? Because our constitutional forefathers have given so much of powers to the governors, and these powers of the governors can be easily misused. There are so many instances as we proceed with our syllabus wherein we can see that the governors have misused those powers. That is when we talk about having inherent checks and balances. That is what we call constitutionalism. What else is constitutionalism? As we study our entire constitution can be defined in terms of only one thing, that is fundamental rights. Our constitutional forefathers, when they had come out with the constitution, they had only one thing in mind when they had come out with the constitution. And what is the only thing that is in their mind? How to protect and promote and preserve the fundamental rights of citizens. Why? Because for 250 years of British rule, Britishers had not given us any basic human rights also. In British establishments, they used to write in a very derogatory manner that Indians and dogs are not allowed. And we were living in our own country, and we were treated as secondary grade citizens, not even citizens. We were not even treated as human beings also. That is the reason why. What is it? Live class. Okay. The last thing I want to hear is my own voice. Right. Of course, with a lot of humility, I have to accept that it is the best. That is what people always complain. That my voice is so melodious that they feel like sleeping in the class all the time. And they always say that I am in the wrong profession. Right? Yeah, I should have been singing songs, at least not to. I would have got Oscar minimum, right? So, but don't worry, we have to be satisfied with what we have now, right? So, but this kind of resound is not at all required. So, coming back here, what we are saying here is that our constitutional forefathers, they realized the fact that the constitution would be meaningless, totally meaningless, unless it is able to protect the rights of the citizens, fundamental rights. That's why we say that our entire constitution can be described in one single sentence. It is fundamental rights only, right? It can be described only as fundamental rights. The three organs of the state, that's what our constitutional forefathers have envisaged. The three organs of the state should always work towards protecting the rights of the citizens. But as I have mentioned, when they have such huge amount of power, they can easily use that power to take away the rights of the citizens. Nowadays, you can see that in our country there is so much of criticism about the government, saying that the government is taking away the rights of citizens. In India, we have only Article 19 talks about the freedom of speech and expression, and it is said that we have a freedom of speech, but we don't have any freedom after speech, right? So there are so many things. Section 124A, the government can easily file sedition charges against you. Section 124A. Then who will come to the rescue of the people? It has to be judiciary. It has to be judiciary. And this is where again we talk about constitutionalism. Constitutionalism is all about implementing ensuring fundamental rights of the citizens in both letter and spirit. It has to be there in both letter and spirit. What is the point of saying that our constitution guarantees us a right to freedom of life and personal liberty? What is the point of saying that our constitution guarantees us a right to equality? What is the point of saying that our constitution guarantees us right to freedom of speech and expression unless the organs of the state, legislature, executive and judiciary, work towards protecting these rights? That is the way when we study about fundamental rights, we say that these fundamental rights are the rights of the citizens and obligations on the part of the state. It is the responsibility of the state. And whether the citizens are able to enjoy those fundamental rights in reality is what constitutionalism is all about. It is what constitutionalism is all about. They can be these rights in letter, but we have to see whether these rights are there in spirit or not. Whether people are able to enjoy these rights in reality or not. That is what we say constitutionalism. Similarly, what are the other dimensions of constitutionalism? We say that another important dimension of constitutionalism is strict implementation of rule of law. This rule of law should be implemented strictly in both letter and spirit. So what do you mean by strict implementation of rule of law? What does we mean by that? It means very simple, that the entire country must be governed strictly according to these provisions of rule of law. Everyone should be treated equally in the eyes of law. And what is the essence of this rule of law? You must give protection to those who are honest citizens, the law, and punish those who are corrupt, those who are criminals. And that is what our constitutionalism talks about. When we talk about constitutionalism, we are asking only one question: whether this rule of law is implemented strictly or not in the country. What is the difference between constitutional democracies like United Kingdom or United States of America or India? In all these countries, there is what is called constitutional democracy. We have in all these countries these democratic structures in the form of legislature, executive, judiciary, independent election commission, universal adult franchise, multi-party system. Everything is there. Then what is the difference? The difference is in terms of implementation. In terms of implementation. For example, take the case of India. With our judiciary right now, almost 48 million cases are pending. 4.8 crore cases are pending with our judiciary at all levels. And what we say is that justice delayed is justice denied. Do we say that we have rule of law? Obviously not. When so many people, similarly, in our jails, 3.5 lakh people are spending their time in jails now. They are all accused of committing the crime. They were not convicted. They were only accused. Tomorrow, if they are proved to be innocent, can we bring them back their lost life? do we have rule of law? Right? That is what we say. Most importantly, if you take our Lok Sabha 2019, 43.5% of our MPs have a criminal records against them, which we call it as a politicization of a crime. 43.5% of our MPs have criminal records against them. When the lawbreakers become lawmakers, do we say that we have rule of law? Right? And these criminal records are not small things. They are very efficient. For example, murders, kidnappings, then encroachment of properties, and other cultural activities. Right? Right? So, everything else, that is how you evaluate the functioning of your constitution. Right? No other country in the world you can find such kind of functioning of democratic systems. No other country in the world. That is the reason why we say that do we have constitutionalism or not? That's why we say that in India we have constitutionalism in letter but not in spirit. And our entire syllabus is about how to ensure that this constitutionalism will be there both in letter as well as in spirit. Constitutionalism says that you need to have a written constitution, which we have. You need to have an independent judiciary, which we have. You need to have a judicial review, again, which we have. And it also says that the fundamental rights of the people should be protected, which we have. It also says that there should be civilian control over army. In India also, we have a civilian control over army. Who is the Supreme Commander of Armed Forces? The President. And the President is a nominal executive. Otherwise, who controls the entire functioning of our army? Defense Minister. The three wings of our armed forces, Army, Navy and Air Force, they will be working under the Defense Minister. That is what we call civilian control over army. On the other hand, you take the case of dictatorships. It is army only that rules those countries. As I gave the example of Pakistan, it is army only that controls Pakistan, even though they have so-called democracy. In India, can army take over the administration of the country? No, they can never. That is what we say constitutionalism, civilian control over army. Similarly, we say that constitutional means civilian control over police forces. Take the case of police forces. Can they act independently? No, they have to work under political executive. For example, at the state level, it is the state home minister who has absolute control over police forces. At the district level, the police officer, the superintendent of police will have to work under a district collector. Right? And at the state level, the DGP will have to work under Home Secretary, and who will be working under Home Minister. So all these features of constitutionalism are present in India only in letter but not in spirit. And how to make sure that they would be present in spirit also, in reality. When we say in spirit means in reality also. How to make sure that they will be there in reality also is what, as I said, the entire syllabus is all about. Now we talk about fundamental rights. We talk about what are the major issues related to fundamental rights. We talk about the parliament. We talk about what are the major problems in declining the standards of our parliament and what should be done. We talk about executive, the president, prime minister and council of ministers. And then we talk about reforms in the functioning of those institutions. Most importantly, you talk about the judiciary and what should be done to make our judiciary more efficient, more accountable and more transparent also. That is what we will be discussing in our entire syllabus. As I keep on saying, our entire syllabus is only about the single word called constitutionalism. Whenever we are writing answers, I will also be dictating answers as we proceed with the syllabus also. Whenever we are writing answers, so that is what we will be looking at. We will say that that particular institution had come into existence to ensure constitutionalism. When we start our discussions on President of India, we say that our constitutional forefathers have created this office of the President of India to ensure constitutionalism. When we discuss about judiciary, we say that the most important function of judiciary is to ensure constitutionalism. That is why we keep on talking about this concept called constitutionalism. Right? Let us take some few lines about constitutionalism. Starting with why do we need constitutionalism? Why do we need constitutionalism? Why do we need constitutionalism? Right down. The state had come into existence. The state had come into existence. The state had come into existence to prevent entropy. To prevent entropy. Citizens had come together. Citizens had come together in a voluntary manner and created the state. There is also upward, full stop, there is also upward delegation of power. Upward delegation of power. Upward delegation of power from citizens to the state. From citizens to the state. State has been given the responsibility. State has been given the responsibility. State has been given the responsibility of protecting and promoting the rights of citizens and also to maximize their welfare. And also to maximize their welfare. To maximize their welfare. Next paragraph. For example, legislature is given the power to make legislations executive to implement them, and judiciary to review them, REVIEW, them for their constitutional validity. Constitutional validity, VALIDITY. Next paragraph. According to Thomas Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes, comma, a famous British political philosopher. A famous British political philosopher. Comma, over a period of time, state has become a Leviathan, Leviathan, Leviathan. You can put it in inverted commas. That is, those who are part of the state, instead of working for the welfare of citizens, started working against their interests. They started acquiring more power unto themselves. Unto themselves. The relationship between the state and the citizens is a two-person zero-sum game. That is, the state can acquire more powers. Only at the cost of freedoms and rights of citizens. Next paragraph. Power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. If absolute power is given to the state, it can result in dictatorship of the state. The concept of constitutionalism has come into existence has come into existence to prevent such a scenario. To prevent such a scenario. Next paragraph. Constitutionalism can be defined from various dimensions. From various dimensions. Let us see all of them. First, in simple terms, constitutionalism means strict implementation of rule of law in both letter and spirit. That is, rule of law should be there in reality also. Law must protect honest and responsible citizens. And strong punishment for those who violate the law. Next, another dimension of a constitutionalism is fundamental rights. Our constitutional forefathers defined the entire essence of our constitution in terms of fundamental rights of citizens. Our constitutional forefathers defined the entire essence of our constitution in terms of fundamental rights of citizens. If I am dictating fast, you can tell me. Yes? Right? Just for your information, in 3 hours you are writing minimum 70 pages in UPSC main examination in 3 hours. In 1 hour, minimum 20 pages. And 1 page you have to write in CSAT questions. Simple. 1 hour 20 pages. 1 page 3 minutes, very good. Answer these kind of complicated questions, right? Rest of the things I will take care of. And in 3 hours in the main examination, you are writing 20 questions, right? So normally, for a 10 marker, you will get around 7 minutes to write the answer. You have to write minimum 150 words, right? In 7 minutes, you are writing at least in a minimum 1.5 pages, almost 2 pages, right? And what you have to remember here is that first you have to read the question. You don't understand anything, then you become a philosopher. You start asking the questions. What is UPSC? Who am I? Why am I? Then cry for some time, then get into depression, then recover, and then write answer. Everything should be done in 7 minutes, right? So writing fast is the most important condition in UPSC preparation. Here, most of you are from science background only. And what is the problem for a student from science background? They are not used to writing. The only longest sentence they have written in their life is their name. Right? Suddenly, writing 65 pages, thinking, crying, becoming a philosopher, getting into depression, and then writing finally. So you need to write very, very fast in the examination, and you have to practice. Nobody can become perfect without practice. That is what they say in English language. Practice makes the man perfect. Sometimes women also. Because women are already perfect. Right? So, why should we get into unnecessary trouble? Right. So that is the reason why you have to write very fast and practice it every day. Every day you have to spend at least 1 hour only on writing. 1 hour every day you have to spend only on writing. To improve the speed. Second, to write in a legible manner also. For example, when you start writing, in the first page, it is English language only. Second, it will become French. Third, Spanish. Fourth, German. By the time last page comes, it will be Harappan literature. Which is yet to be which is yet to be deciphered. Right? You cannot be taking revenge like this. And those who evaluate your answers, they don't have that kind of patience to learn so many languages. That is the reason why you have to write fast. Since this is only, we are starting only very beginning classes, I am trying to dictate very slowly. After a few classes, you will see my true personality. And then you will realize that after Adolf Hitler, I am the only great dictator in the world. Dictating very fast. Don't think otherwise, right? Dictating very fast. Pardon? Right. Anyway, so that is what. So in a practice every day you have to practice, because you have to write very fast, and not all of us can have the best of handwritings also. You have to improve also. When I was taking this examination in our post graduation, our professors, they used to give marks for the number of pages you write, quantity. In 3 hours, if you write 70 pages, 80 pages, you will get out of 100 marks, at least 50, 60 marks. If you write 100 pages, you will get 70 marks. So you start writing, and you don't know what you are writing. And you will make sure that you are writing in such a manner that they cannot understand also. And in the professors, also they can, if they are not giving you marks, you can always go on strike, because you have studied a lot of fundamental rights. So right against exploitation, and you will say that you have to give me marks. You go on strike and they will give you marks. But in UPSC, that kind of facility is not there. Normally the professors in the universities, what do? They don't evaluate your answers, they will be evaluated by the research scholars who will be working under them, who will be doing research under them. So when I was writing answers, the research scholars, they would come and request me, why can't you write legibly? I said that I cannot, because if you know what I am writing, then you will not give me marks. You start your answer with the question only. By the time it comes to the second page, you will be writing about the latest film you have seen. Third page, why India has lost cricket match. So, and last page again, the answer. They can read it. So I was taking UPSC main examination, and ironically, the invigilator in the classroom was my senior only, and who was my victim, because she used to evaluate my answer sheets in university. And she would come and request me, plead with me in the examination hall. At least now, you can have legible handwriting. I said that why should I have? Why should I have? Because with this same kind of handwriting, I could clear so many examinations. And this kind of handwriting is my secret of success. So why should I change my handwriting? Right? But UPSC will not be so considerate. You need to have legible handwriting, and you have to write very fast also. Especially, as I said, those who are from science background. Make sure that you are practicing every day, at least for 1 hour. As I tell you, towards the end of our class, I will also be telling you, how to read this newspaper also, and what you have to do after reading the newspaper also. I will tell you. You are reading one article in newspaper. After reading that article, leave the newspaper and write whatever you have understood from the article in your own words. That is how you develop writing skills. In the first attempt, you will not be able to write anything, but still write something. Then go back to the newspaper, read the article again, and then try to write again. That is how you develop the writing skills. So proceeding further, what did you write? Fundamental rights of citizens, full stop. Right? Constitutionalism, right? No, same point. Constitutionalism can be defined in terms of the ability of the state to protect and promote the fundamental rights of the citizens. Fundamental rights of the citizens. Next dimension. Constitutionalism can be defined in terms of limited government. That is, none of the organs of the state should have absolute powers. In our constitutional democracy, in our constitutional democracy, comma, the three organs of the state, that is legislature, executive and judiciary, are supreme in their own domain, DOMAIN, but are not sovereign, SOVEREIGN, sovereign. It is the constitution, which can be considered as a sovereign document. These three organs of the state, derive their power from the Constitution. And they have only limited powers. Next dimension. Constitutionalism can also be defined as having inherent checks and balances, inherent checks and balances, checks and balances within the system. So that none of the organs of the state can become dictatorial in their functioning. For example, judiciary has the power to declare any law, LAW law, null and void, NULL, null and void, VOID, if it violates VIO, LATES, violates fundamental rights of the citizens. In brackets Article 13. Full stop. Legislature has the power to ensure continuous accountability of executive. in brackets passing of budget, PASSING, passing of budget, comma, confidence and no confidence motions, confidence and no confidence motions. Similarly, Parliament has the power to define the boundaries of judicial functioning through various legislations. Judicial functioning through various legislations. It ensures proper checks and balances within the system. Proper checks and balances within the system. Right. Next point. Finally, constitutionalism can be defined as sovereignty of citizens. Sovereignty of citizens. As sovereignty of citizens. All the three organs of state derive their power from the Constitution which is framed by citizens of the country. Which is framed by citizens of the country. In a constitutional democracy, citizens are absolutely sovereign. Absolutely sovereign, as they have the power to remove governments through elections. So this is what we say about all the dimensions of constitutionalism. As we have discussed earlier, we said that constitutionalism can be defined from various dimensions. Please remember, each and every of them have been asked as questions in our prelims examination. Constitutionalism can be defined as a strict implementation of rule of law in both letter and spirit. It is defined as a ultimate protection of a fundamental rights of the citizens. Our constitutional forefathers essentially defined our entire constitution in terms of the fundamental rights. It is the ability of the state to protect and promote the fundamental rights of the citizens that could define ultimately what is constitutionalism. And this constitutionalism, as you have written, can be defined in terms of what is called a limited government. What is the difference between a dictatorship and a democracy? In a dictatorship, the ruler has absolute powers. There is no limit on the powers exercised by the ruler. Whatever the ruler would say automatically become a law. And if people do not follow, ruler can indiscriminately take action against the people. Is there any independent judiciary? Obviously not. That is the reason why we say that constitutionalism means limited government. None of the organs of the state should have absolute powers. They have only limited power. As you have written, our constitution has given certain powers to legislature, some powers to executive, some more powers to judiciary, but none of them are having sovereign powers. They are supreme in their own domains, but they are not sovereign. And what is sovereign here? Constitution. Recently, as I have mentioned, our vice president has made a statement. He said that our parliament is a sovereign body. In the parliamentary democracy, he said that there is sovereignty of the parliament, legislature. And immediately this was objected to by the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court. He said that in our constitutional democracy, it is the constitution which is sovereign. Neither legislature, nor executive, nor judiciary. This is the right position according to our constitutional forefathers. As I said, as we proceed, we will talk about all these kind of conflicts that are taking place between these organs of the state. Again, as you have written, constitutionalism means inherent checks and balances. Legislature must be controlling the power of executive, and executive and legislature should be controlled by judiciary, and then the legislature and executive can control the functioning of judiciary through various legislations. So that is why we said that inherent checks and balances, so that none of the organs of the state can become dictator in their functioning, dictatorial. And ultimately, as you have written, constitutionalism means absolute sovereignty of the citizens. As we study, we start our discussions of constitutionalism with preamble. In preamble, it starts with the phrase, we, the people of India. We, the people of India. The preamble does not say, we, the Parliament of India, nor I, the Prime Minister of the country. Or it will not say, we, the Supreme Court of India. It says, we, the people of India. They are ultimately sovereign entities in our constitutional democracy. So these are all the different dimensions of constitutionalism. Then let us proceed and look at important features of constitutionalism. Important features of constitutionalism. Yeah. See, a parliament can make a legislation to give more powers to judiciary. It cannot reduce the powers of judiciary. If parliament is given the power to reduce the powers of judiciary, what happens then? Parliament can become sovereign. Yes, that is the reason why Supreme Court has recognized in the Keshwan and the Bharati case the power of a parliament to amend any part of the constitution, including fundamental rights. At the same time, Supreme Court has said that parliament cannot amend basic structure. And what is this basic structure? Nobody knows. Supreme Court has said that they would keep on defining a basic structure from time to time. When Parliament had come out with the NJAC Constitution Amendment, 1990 Constitutional Amendment, NJAC Bill, Supreme Court had struck down NJAC in 2015, saying that it violates the basic structure of the Constitution. So that is the reason why Parliament does not have any absolute sovereign power. Judiciary can always interfere. That is what we say, checks and balances. Right? So that is what we say about constitutionalism. Now proceeding further, let us see the important features of constitutionalism. When do we say that a country has a constitutionalism in the functioning of its political and administrative systems? We say that a country has constitutionalism only when all these features are there present. So let us see what are those important features. First, written constitution. Written constitution. Second, separation of powers. Separation of powers between three organs of the state. Third, independent judiciary. Independent judiciary. Fourth, judicial review. Judicial review. Fifth, federal form of government, federal form of democracy. Federal form of democracy. Next, civilian control over army. Next, rule of law. Next, civilian control over law enforcement agencies. Law enforcement agencies. Law enforcement agencies. Right? So this is what we say about the features of constitutionalism. Next, write down. In our parliamentary democracy, all these features are present. But it must be remembered, they should be present in both letter and spirit. They should be present in both letter and spirit. They should be present in both letter and spirit. It is said that in India, they are mostly present in letter. But not fully in spirit. Due to many weaknesses in the functioning of our institutions. For example, more than 48 million cases are pending. More than 48 million cases are pending at different levels in our judicial system. In our judicial system, 43.5% of MPs in Lok Sabha have criminal records. have criminal records. They have criminal records. Once the cases are filed in India, as part of rule of law, as we study, you are innocent till you are proved guilty. When will you be proved guilty? 300 years. That is where the problem is. That is the reason why we study about criminalization of politics and politicization of crime and electoral reforms. We say that let there be special courts that are set up to only look into these criminal records against our members of legislature, because lawbreakers cannot be lawmakers. If they are convicted, they should be losing their membership. If they are acquitted, they can continue to be members of parliament. But you cannot have a situation wherein they can continue to be part of parliament when you are accused. That goes against the spirit of parliamentary democracy. That is the reason why we are saying we do not have constitutionalism in spirit. Right? Continue. Reforms should be implemented. Reforms should be implemented in the functioning of various institutions to ensure constitutionalism in both letter and spirit. Right? So whatever the data we are taking mostly only from government sources. Recently only the law minister himself has said that 48 million cases are pending before our judiciary. According to Association for Democratic Reforms, a non-governmental organization, it has said that it has looked into the affidavits submitted by these members of parliament to election commission. On the basis of those affidavits, it has concluded that 43.5% of our MPs have criminal records. Everything is based on facts. Right? So this is what we say about constitutionalism. We say that at the end of the day, our entire syllabus is all about constitutionalism. How to make sure that these institutions perform well in both letter and spirit. How to make sure that there would not be any dictatorship of any kind. How to make sure that each and every citizen of the country should enjoy fundamental rights in both letter and spirit. Right to equality, right against discrimination, right to life and personal liberty, right to freedom of speech and expression, right against exploitation. These are all the rights that every citizen must enjoy. What is the point of having writing all these rights in the constitution when people at the ground level do not enjoy them? That is the reason why we talk about constitutionalism. You may have best of the constitutions in the world, but you may not be having constitutionalism. On the other hand, take the case of United Kingdom. They do not have any written constitution, but they have constitutionalism. In India, we have a written constitution, but we do not have a fully constitutionalism. Definitely we have constitutionalism to a greater extent, to a much larger extent, but not complete. Why? Because we have to improve the functioning of our institutions, judiciary, legislature, executive. All those reforms are the essence of our entire syllabus. In our main examination, almost every question is about how to reform the institutions. That is what we will be studying. That is what is called constitutionalism. Right? Any doubts you can ask about constitutionalism. What is the meaning of letter and spirit? That is what I am saying. What is there in the constitution is in the form of letter. It says that article 21, right to life and personal liberty. But do the people at the ground level, are they able to enjoy this right to life and personal liberty? Right to freedom of speech and expression, right against exploitation. For example, we have banned untouchability under article 17. If untouchability is practiced at the ground level in villages, what is the point of including this article in the constitution when it is not there in the spirit? That is what we say. In reality, it should be there. For example, right against exploitation. You go to a village, the landlord will force the worker, the laborer, to work in his agricultural field for 15 hours a day. Article 23 talks about right against exploitation. It says that the government has banned beggar. That is this kind of forced labor, slavery. It is being still practiced. It is still being practiced. Again, Article 23 talks about banning this child labor. But you can see child labor almost everywhere. Every nook and corner of the country you find children being employed. What is the point of mentioning all of them in the constitution when it cannot be implemented in reality? That is what we say, both letter and more importantly in spirit. You go to any small time shop, these tea shops, there you find children working. But it is right against exploitation. And we also had come out with this article 21A, wherein we said that 86th amendment, we are giving them right to free and compulsory education for children between 6 to 14 years. And you tell the child who is working in the tea shop that you have these kind of rights. That is what we say. What is the point of having best of the constitutions in the world when you are not able to implement them in reality? That is what Ambedkar has said. He said that we constitutional makers have given the best of the constitutions for the future generations. Ultimately, who has to realize the ideals mentioned in the constitution? Who has to realize the ideals mentioned in the constitution? Those who are in the government. Those who are part of legislature and executive. It is ultimately the political parties and the people. Why people? We are the ones who are electing those political parties to power. Tomorrow, if a politician, if a leader becomes dictatorial in his functioning, who should be blamed? Who should be blamed? People. Why? Because we have elected that leader. We have elected that leader. So why should we blame that? Why should we blame the leader? That is what Ambedkar has said. He said that it is about the political parties and more importantly the people. People must know about their rights. They should know how to protect their rights. So what is the biggest problem in India? As I said, we have given ourselves one of the best constitutions in the world. But at the end of the day, how many people in our country are aware about this constitution? You go to any village and ask average Indian villager, does he know about fundamental rights? For example, all of you are educated, at least completing the graduation or completed in the process, right? How many of you know about fundamental rights? How many of you know? Only 1 or 2, 3, 4 people, right? What about others? If this is the case with the so-called educated elite sections of our society, what about ordinary people? If you don't know your rights, Is it possible for you to protect your rights? Not at all. That is the reason why we say that in India we do not have constitutionalism. What is the difference between Western countries and India? In the Western countries, they have awareness about their rights. They also know how to make their governments accountable for their performance. On the other hand, in India, this lack of awareness. That is the reason why we say that we need to bring in reforms, create awareness among the people. Let each and every person in the country know about their rights, so that they can make sure that their governments would not abuse those rights, limit those rights. That is what we say constitutionalism. Right? I think, do you need any break? Very good. Yes. Yeah, we will discuss all of them. Yes, confidence motion and no confidence motion. Confidence motion is moved by the Prime Minister, requesting the House to express his confidence in his leadership. No confidence motion is moved by the opposition parties, expressing lack of confidence in the leadership skills of Prime Minister. We will discuss all of them as part of Parliament. Yes. Just a minute. First, let me take up the question, then we can take the break. How legislature and executive limit the power of judiciary. For example, Supreme Court is coming out with a judgment. Parliament can nullify Supreme Court judgment through a constitutional amendment. That is how they can do it. Obviously, then again Parliament can come out. So that is what it is. So that none of them have absolute sovereign power. Yeah. Civilian control over law enforcement agencies. That is what I am saying. Take the case of police forces, state police, right? Central police organizations, CBI. All of them will be working under political executive. They are not independent. For example, can you give complete freedom to the police? If you give complete freedom to police, what happens? Tomorrow you become a IPS officer. You don't like a person in front of you. Just for fun, you will kill him and say that this person is an Naxalite come terrorist. So that is the reason why we cannot give them complete. They have to work under civilian administration. That is why we say civilian control over law enforcement agencies. On the other hand, in a police state, police will have absolute powers. Like during the British times. During the British times, police could arrest any person without any charges and imprison the person for any length of time. You'll be sent to Andaman jail, open jail, Kalapani, and you'll be there till you die. There is no inquiry, there is no investigation. That is what we call a police state. That is the way we say that civilian control over police. If you are arrested by the police, then you can file a habeas corpus petition saying that you have been illegally detained. It is the responsibility of the state to produce in the court. That is what we say. Yeah. They are also, not proved guilty, but they are in jail. That is what we say. We do not have constitutionalism because we have different standards for different people. Former Chief Election Commissioner, while writing in Hindu, he said that why should we have these double standards? When we say that 43.5% of MPs in Lok Sabha, they also have criminal records against them, but we are calling them innocent because they are yet to be proved guilty. On the other hand, why do we have this kind of double standard wherein 3.5 lakh people who are accused, they are spending time in jail? Why can't we release them? That is what he has asked the question. For this, we don't have any answer. You are asking those kind of questions for which, the questions are right. The person is wrong. You are asking a wrong person, right question. Right? Yes. Citizens also? Yes. State doesn't? Obviously, that is what we are saying here. There is always this balance of power between the citizens and the state. All these rights that we are talking about, None of the fundamental rights we say are absolute. State can always impose reasonable restrictions. That is where we can see this balance of power. If people are given absolute powers, then it results in anarchy. That is the reason why there are reasonable restrictions that are imposed by the state. Right? They think you can take break. After the break, we will continue. You can take break for 10 minutes. So from constitutionalism, let us move and look at important features of our constitution in a brief manner. Why brief? Because that is what we will be discussing in our entire syllabus. All those features will be discussed in a very detailed manner in our entire syllabus. So let us look at important features. First one is parliamentary democracy. Parliamentary democracy. Parliamentary democracy. In a parliamentary democracy, executive comes from legislature. Executive comes from legislature. And is accountable to legislature. And is accountable to legislature. India has opted for parliamentary democracy over presidential form of government, because it ensures, it means parliamentary democracy, it ensures continuous accountability, of Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister. Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister to legislature. Right? As I said, we will talk about all of them as part of our discussions on Parliament. Parliament we will be discussing for at least minimum 1 week. A lot has to be discussed. There we will talk about all of them. So briefly what we are saying here is that in a parliamentary democracy, this executive means the Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister. They are accountable to legislature. That is, in our parliamentary democracy, they are accountable to Lok Sabha. They can stay in power only for that period of time they enjoy majority in Lok Sabha. So how our democracy functions? After every 5 years, we have elections. After every 5 years, we have elections that are held to Lok Sabha. And how these elections are held? On the basis of universal adult franchise. That means every citizen of the country is given the right to vote. Anyone who is above 18 years age, physical, not mental. Otherwise, we have to take away the voting rights of every person in the country. They are not matured, right? That's why anyone who is above 18 years is given the right to vote. I am sure all of you must have got voting rights. Yes? Right? You must have voted also in elections. Right? Maybe you have got voting rights maybe long time back, 100 years back. Right? So that is what we say. And how this parliamentary democracy functions, as I said, after every 5 years elections are held to these territorial constituencies in Lok Sabha. The maximum strength of Lok Sabha is 552, and normally at present it has 545, and elections are held. Any political party that gets majority in Lok Sabha, 273 seats, will be forming the government. The leader of the political party will become automatically the Prime Minister. In 2019 elections, BJP had got almost 300 seats in Lok Sabha, and that is the reason why BJP was invited by the President to form the government, and the leader of BJP, Narendra Modi, had become Prime Minister. And for how long he can continue to be the Prime Minister? The term of Lok Sabha is 5 years. For those 5 years, the leader can continue to be the Prime Minister. Can he be removed before the expiry of his term? Yes. If he loses confidence of Lok Sabha, he can be removed. That is what we say parliamentary democracy. On the other hand, America has a presidential form of democracy, wherein there is clear-cut separation between legislature and executive. We'll talk about them as part of a comparison of constitutions also. We'll make a comparison between India and America. Next feature of our constitution. Next feature of our constitution is a federal form of democracy. Federal form of democracy. Our constitutional forefathers have realized the fact that such a large and diverse country as India, cannot be governed from a single place. They have opted for a federal polity. With the division of powers. Between the union and the state governments. In 1992, federalism was further expanded. To include the third tier, TIER, in the form of local self-governments. As usual, we'll talk about all of them. We'll start with the first article of the Constitution itself when we talk about Union of States. There we will talk about this federalism in a more detailed manner. Of course, this center-state relations we will be discussing extensively, because a very good number of questions in both the prelims and mains will be asked from center-state relations. Next, yes, India has a quasi-federation. semi-federation. We will talk about all of them. As I said just now, I am only briefly giving some introduction to all of them. As we proceed, we will talk about all of them. For example, nowhere in the constitution it is mentioned that India is India has federalism. India is only described as union of states. These federal arrangements are there only for administrative convenience. The states in India, as we study later, are only administrative entities. They do not have any separate political identity. For example, we have only single citizenship, right? From north to south, from east to west, the only identity that we have is Indian identity. So you cannot be called a citizen of the state. You are only a citizen of the country. These states can be destroyed, they can be created, their boundaries can be altered, their names can be changed by the parliament with just a simple majority on the floor of the house. That is the reason why, as we study, India is described as an indestructible union consisting of destructible states. Recently, in the last 10 years, we have seen these provisions of the constitution working. This Andhra Pradesh was divided into Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and recently Jammu and Kashmir was converted into a union territory. So this can be done by the parliament with a simple majority. That is the reason why these federal arrangements in our constitution are only for administrative convenience. Why? Because, as you have written, such a large and diverse country like India cannot be governed from a single place. So, those who are in Kerala, they know about their problems better. They can come out with the solutions better also. That is the reason why we are giving certain powers to the states, so that they can independently rule their own territories. At the same time, all of them have to follow the directions of the union government. That is the reason why we have emergency provisions also. As we said, we will study about all of them. Next important feature of our constitution. Yes. Federation and confederation. We will study all of them. As I said, when we say United States of America, we call it as a true federation. True federation. What does it mean? In United States of America, all the states had come together in a voluntary manner to create this federation. That is the reason why we say in United States of America, you can see that the states are mentioned in the name of the country, United States of America. It's a true federal country. Whenever we talk about the example of a classic federation, we give the example of United States of America. In India, do we call India United States of India? We only call Union of India, Union of States. So in a federation, all these entities, federal units, will come together and they will create the federation in a voluntary manner, in a confederation of states. Whereas in India, this kind of federation is not voluntary. At the time of independence, we had more than 640 princely states. If we were to give them each and every one the freedom either to join Indian Union or to remain independent, would there be any India? Obviously not. India at this point of time would have had at least 600 countries, all of them. And Cricket World Cup can be played only in India. And IPL will be called WPL, World Premier League. Right? That is the reason why India is not an example of what is called a classic federation. As I said, we will talk about all of them. Next, next feature is independent judiciary. Independent judiciary. independent judiciary. Our constitutional forefathers have made sure that judiciary would remain independent of legislature and executive. It is given the most important function of judicial review. To ensure constitutionalism. Any law which restricts the scope of fundamental rights can be declared as null and void by our judiciary. Next feature of our constitution, fundamental rights. The essence of our entire constitution lies in FRs, fundamental rights. They are necessary for effective functioning of democracy. They protect citizens from dictatorship of executive, but none of the fundamental rights are absolute in nature. None of the fundamental rights are absolute in nature. None of them are absolute in nature. The state can impose reasonable restrictions. Next, fundamental duties. What are these fundamental duties? DUTIES, fundamental duties. Fundamental duties are not part of the original constitution. Fundamental duties are not part of original constitution. ORIGINAL, original constitution. They have been added by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. They define duties of citizens. Like respecting constitution, national flag and national anthem, national flag and national anthem, protecting sovereignty of the country, and so on and so on. Next, secularism. Secularism. These are all the features of our constitution. Right, and our constitutional forefathers had realized the fact that unity and integrity of the country, is possible only when the country is truly secular. Country is truly secular. That is, the state does not differentiate. The state does not differentiate. That is, the state does not differentiate between the people on the basis of their religion. On the basis of their religion. It recognizes all religions and treats them equally. So that is what we say secularism. Very simple. It means that the state will not differentiate people on the basis of their religion. Whatever may be your religion, you will be treated equally in the eyes of the law. Very simple. If you are a Hindu, or if you are a Muslim, or if you are a Christian, or if you are a Sikh, or a Parsi, or a Jain, the state will not discriminate you. Everyone will be treated equally, and every religion will command the same amount of respect from the state. Yes. It was added later, but secularism, that is what Ambedkar has said. He said that there is no need to add secularism in the preamble of our constitution, because entire constitution conveys only secularism, especially the fundamental rights 25 to 28. They only talk about the secular fabric of our nation. But later, as part of 42nd Amendment, this was added to preamble. As I said, we will discuss all of them. Maybe in our next class itself we will be discussing preamble. There we will be going a little bit more deeper into all of them. Yes. Right. So that is what we say. India is always a secular country, wherein in society also normally you can see that people are not differentiated on the basis of their religion. But there are so many, what you can say, some elements who can keep on creating trouble. Except for them, otherwise India is always a peaceful country, wherein it is home to all the religions in the world. Take the case of Christianity. Christianity had come to the, apart from the Central Asian republics, it is only the India that has seen the coming of Christianity in the country for the first time. And same, take the case of Islam. It has been there since 8th century onwards in India. And Buddhism and Jainism, they are considered part of mostly Hinduism only. Same is the case with Sikhism. You find all these religions, almost all the religions in the world have their followers in India. That is the reason why India is truly a secular state. As we study later, when we talk about secularism, we say that Western countries can learn a thing or two about how to practice secularism from Indian polity, Indian society. In the Western countries, they are facing so many problems. The question that was asked in our polity also, as part of comparison of constitutions, the difference in the concept of secularism between France and India. In India, we practice a true secularism. As I said, there are some fringe elements which we don't have to really take note of. Overall, the country is largely secular, wherein the state would not differentiate people on the basis of their religion, and the state will also treat each and every religion with the same amount of respect, equal respect for all religions. That is what we say Indian concept of secularism. And the next feature of our constitution. Yes. Is it possible to have democracy without secularism? Very difficult. Because in a multi-religious society like India, democracy cannot be possible without secularism. In fact, for that matter, any other country, you need to be secular. Take the case of United States of America. It is truly secular, right? And Western countries. So you cannot have democracy without secularism. Yes. In the preamble, that we will discuss, as I said when we discuss preamble in our next class. You must understand my problem also. If I discuss everything today, already I am discussing so much, entire syllabus I am discussing as part of features of constitution. In the next class you will say that we have already discussed all these things. Why are you repeating the things? So I have to make sure that whenever you come to the next class, you must feel that we are doing something new also, right? So we will discuss all of them, right? So someone is asking the question, are fundamental duties enforceable? No, they are only some kind of guidelines. But Parliament can make a legislation to enforce fundamental duties. Yes. Nothing. Right. There are fundamental duties, we will talk about them separately. They are not fundamental duties. Only thing is that you have to maintain peace and harmony in the society. It is, if you are not calling the police, it does not mean that you are violating fundamental duties. Right? Or you can help the person to commit the crime. That can be your fundamental duty. Right. Next one is next feature of our constitution is this directive principles of state policy. Directive principles of state policy. Directive principles of state policy. These directive principles of state policy, these directive principles of state policy provide guidelines to the executive while formulating public policies. While formulating public policies, they provide guidelines to the executive while formulating public policies. They are not legally enforceable. They are not legally enforceable. That is a violation of DPSPs cannot be questioned in a court of law. Violation of DPSPs cannot be questioned in a court of law because they are only directives. Because they are only directives. For example, if I say that every day you have to study for 8 hours, this is only directive, right? If you don't study, next day will I send you to jail? That is what we say. These directive principles of state policy, they say that this is what the state should follow while formulating policies. This is what the state should take into consideration while formulating policies. It says that the state must protect the interests of weaker sections of society. The state must protect the interests of labor workers. The state must ensure protection of ecology, environment. The state must work towards a uniform civil code. The state must ensure that these local bodies, panchayats, are given more powers. Like that, we have so many directive principles of state policy. They are different. That is model code of conduct. No, that is a different thing. They are only promises made by the political parties at the time of elections. For example, in 2014, BJP has promised 2 crore jobs. In 5 years, they must have provided 10 crore jobs. And 2 people got jobs. 1 president, 2nd vice president. Right? So, can you take the political party to court? No, because these promises are only promises. As we study, promises are meant to be broken. Right? So, if you are voting, it is your problem, not the political party. Every political party make those kind of promises. Why only BJP? Why should we only blame one political party? Every political party makes promises. Right? If they come to power, they say that they will fulfill promises. But it does not mean that we can make them accountable. Election Commission recently has said that political parties should be made somehow accountable for the promises they are making. Why? Because they are making mostly unrealistic promises. Unrealistic promises. In Himachal Pradesh elections, BJP has promised that every school, college going girl will be given scooties. Right? So, they are giving scooty, but what about petrol? Right? So that is the thing. So they are not, these promises are not DPSPs, they are different. Yes. Election Commission cannot do anything. See, any political party can make any promise. Election Commission cannot, prohibit political parties from making promises. The role of Election Commission is only limited. It cannot do anything. Recently, as we study letter with Election Commission had come out with a proposal saying that when political parties are making these promises, they should also mention from where they are going to get money to finance all these promises. But nobody will accept these kind of reforms by election commission. Almost all opposition parties have said that who is election commissions to impose these kind of restrictions on us. So no, those kind of reforms will not be implemented. Ideally, they should be implemented. Again, say for example, they are making a promise and they are not fulfilling. Then what should you do? Take the leader of the political party and send him to jail? Then in the next elections, nobody will make promises. Which is better? Then how will you contest elections? That is why let them make promises and take all those promises with a pinch of salt is not enough. With all the salt in the world, in all the oceans. Pinch of salt means you are taking them lightly. So don't take those promises very seriously. That's why we say that as part of electoral reforms, people should vote on the basis of the work done by the political parties than on the basis of the promises they are making. We should vote. On the other hand, in India, how do we vote in elections? In India, people mostly vote in the name of their religion or their caste, or these subsidies, or reservations. These are only factors. That is why they say that in India, people don't cast their vote; they vote their caste. That is what happens. You must also have done the same thing. No, right? So that is what happens in India. That's why we need to move towards a political culture wherein there is awareness among the people. As we study later, as part of governance, also all these things. When the political parties are giving these freebies, where is the money coming from? The money is coming from taxpayers. Tax revenues. If the government is giving rice free of cost, under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, PMGKAY, the market price of the rice is 40 rupees, and the government is giving it 0 rupees, free. And what the government is doing, they are giving you with the right hand, and they will take everything with left hand. For example, the market price of say petrol is 45 rupees, and the government is charging from you 110 rupees. How much they are taking? They are taking, CSAT question, take your time. 65 rupees. And they are giving you 40 rupees. And who is winning? Government. People don't realize these things. That is why we need overall reforms. Right? Next, right, yes. Secularism and sectarianism reflects? No, they are different. Sectarianism basically is, you can say, is a opposite of secularism. Sectarian politics. You are trying to have a different identity politics. Sectorial identities, sectarian. For example, when political parties are demanding votes in the name of religion, that is what say communalism, sectarian politics. Whereas in secularism we say that everyone should be treated equally. In India, we do not have true secularism. The meaning of secularism has changed over a period of time, with almost every political party trying to demand votes in the name of religion. Again, why? Because lack of awareness among the people. I did not get you. What is he saying? Every sect has a. Yes, that is what given in our constitution, Article 25. It says that every religious sect has the freedom to practice their belief, their faith, their traditions and customs. It is given to us by our constitution. It is given to us. We will talk about all of them, as I said, as part of fundamental rights. We will discuss all of them. Right. So what is the next one that you are writing? DPSPs you have written? Okay, next one. Next feature of our constitution is, yes, any other doubt? Anyone? Okay, fine, no problem. You can keep on asking doubts, no problem. Because as I said, initially, since it is a completely new topic, you will always have doubts. Let us not proceed without clearing your doubts. It might slow down our lectures a little bit, but it is good also. Once we get familiar with this, then you will automatically understand everything. Yes. Yes, that is what again we'll discuss. Judiciary will be discussing for at least 4 days. So they are different, don't worry. Just because I said that you should ask doubts, it does not mean that you have to ask all the doubts. Right, don't worry, we will talk about all of them. In India, our judiciary is truly independent, so don't worry. It has nothing to do with the president. Judiciary can perform its function on its own, without any kind of interference by the executive. It is truly independent. For example, yesterday's Supreme Court judgment, wherein Supreme Court has said that election commission members should be appointed by a collegium. So, next feature of our constitution is, our constitution is both, you can write, our constitution is both, that is the heading, it is both rigid and flexible. It is both rigid and flexible. This is the feature of our constitution. It is both rigid and flexible. It is rigid because some provisions of the constitution, require special majority to make any changes to them. Whereas rest of them require simple majority on the floor of the House. Simple majority on the floor of the House. What are they? As I said, as we proceed, we will look at all of them. Next feature of our constitution, single citizenship. Single citizenship. Single citizenship. Our constitutional forefathers realized that it is possible to ensure unity and integrity of the nation only with a single citizenship. Having multiple identities, can create problems in ensuring the unity and integrity of our nation. So what are the multiple identities that we are talking about here? What are the multiple identities? Identity in the form of religion, in the form of region, in the form of language, in the form of caste, in the form of gender, race, ethnicity. That means you are creating more divisions within the country. And by creating more divisions within the country, you will not be able to ensure the unity and integrity of the nation. That is the reason why the only identity people of our country have is they are all Indian citizens, from north to south, from east to west. Next one is emergency provisions. Emergency provisions. Emergency provisions. Emergency provisions have been included to face extraordinary situations. To face extraordinary situations. Extraordinary situations. Whenever country's sovereignty is threatened, country's sovereignty is threatened by external forces, or law and order problems are created, internally, these emergency provisions can be used. These emergency provisions can be used to restore RESTORE normalcy. NORMALCY, to restore normalcy. Again, we will talk about all these emergency provisions. We talk about three types of emergency. One is national emergency, second one is president's rule, third one is financial emergency. So these are all some of the important features of our constitution, right? From the features of our constitution, we can move on to criticism against our constitution. Let us see the criticisms against the constitution. What is the criticism against our constitution? First, as usual, let us discuss them and then you can note down. So what is the criticism against our constitution? Our constitution has been criticized on several grounds. First and foremost, Indian constitution is the lengthiest constitution in the world. At the time of commencement of the constitution, we had 8 schedules and hundreds and hundreds of articles, right? Hundreds and hundreds of articles. Compared to United States of America, it has only 7 articles. You can complete, as I said, entire American polity in one day. Whereas, take the case of India. You read polity for light years. Light years. Still, you cannot say that you have completed it. One of the lengthiest constitutions in the world. What is the reason why we have such a long constitution, such a big constitution. Right, I will tell you, don't worry. Right, right. So, why? Because according to the critics, what they have said is that our constitutional forefathers could not differentiate between what is constitution and what is day-to-day administration. So, in United States of America, there is only one single article about federalism. In India, center-state relations, you have articles, sub-articles, sub-sub-articles, so many of them. And take the case of President of India. There shall be a President of India. Then how the President of India should be elected, what are his powers, what kind of dress he has to wear. Everything is part of Constitution. Do we need to include all those things as part of Constitution? Take the case of Parliament. The functioning of Parliament. There are so many articles. Take the case of fundamental rights. We have articles from Article 12 to 35. And take the case of judiciary. You have so many articles. Take the case of Council of Ministers. You have so many articles. And take the case of constitutional bodies. You have so many articles. Do we need to have so many articles? That is the question that the critics have asked. They said that our constitutional forefathers could not differentiate between what is a constitution and what is a day-to-day administration. That is the reason why they have included all those which can be considered as a day-to-day administration in our constitution, making it one of the lengthiest constitutions in the world. And what can be said in defense of our constitutional forefathers? Why did they include even day-to-day administration also in our constitution? They have included it because deliberately, that is what Ambedkar has said. Yes, they said that Ambedkar has said that we have included even day-to-day administration also because we do not have any kind of experience with democracy. So tomorrow in the future generations can easily abuse the constitution. That is the reason why we do not want the future generations to abuse the constitution. And as a part of a precaution, we have included everything in the constitution so that it becomes difficult for them to amend this constitution, to change the nature of the constitution, to change the nature of the functioning of our democracy. They have included all of them as a precautionary measure. So we don't completely agree with the criticism that it is one of the lengthiest. Yes, it is one of the lengthiest constitutions in the world. There is no doubt about it. But there is a reason behind it also. Because they did not want a situation to arise in the future wherein not being mentioned in the constitution can be the reason for executive to change the entire constitution also. That's the reason why they have so many articles about election to the office of the president. They have so many articles about the powers of the governor. They have so many articles about the relation between the center and the states. They have so many articles about the functioning of judiciary. So that tomorrow for future generations, if they have any kind of doubt, if they have any kind of problem, they can go back to the constitution and look at what constitution has mentioned. That is the reason. That is the reason why if you see now also our Supreme Court, our judiciary always goes back to the constitution whenever there is any dispute. They comes out with their judgments according to the provisions of the constitution. Yesterday's Supreme Court judgment regarding this appointment of election commissioner and election commissioners and chief election commissioner, it has said that it was going by strictly according to the provisions of the constitution under Article 324. That is why we needed such a lengthy constitution, because we did not have any experience. Second, there is every possibility that the future generation can easily misuse if they are not mentioned in writing. That is the reason why in the first place we have a written constitution also. Then what are the other criticisms against our constitution? Next criticism against our constitution is that This is a valid criticism, we can say. They say that our constitution is a lawyer's paradise, a common man's nightmare. What does it mean? If you look at all those members of Constituent Assembly, all of them were lawyers. All of them were lawyers. And what is the problem with lawyers? The language they use is so complicated, extremely complicated. Nobody can understand, including themselves. Right? And that is the reason why, if you read articles of the Constitution, if you are able to understand them in your first attempt, it means that there is something seriously wrong with you. Otherwise, ordinary, normal human beings can never understand. Nobody can understand. It is written in such complicated language. Last year, in your this essay paper, general essay, a statement was given. Simplicity is the most sophisticated form. That means you should always make things very simple. Our constitutional forefathers never believed in it. Make them as complicated as they can. And that is what exactly is our constitution. That is the reason why interpreting the constitution can be extremely difficult task also. Because it is written in such a complicated language that it can be subjected to different types of interpretation also. It is said that our constitution is a lawyer's paradise, heaven, and a common man's nightmare. Alright? That is the reason why tomorrow onwards, you have a very good solution. If you are not able to sleep, open Constitution. Read the first article. You feel like sleepy. Go to the second page. You will be sleeping. And if you are still awake, go to the third page. You will sleep forever. Right? So that is where the problem is. It is so complicated. This criticism is definitely valid. It is so complicated. That is the reason why, we are living in the age of Twitter, wherein in 250 letters, alphabets, you are defining the entire world. And why do you need a constitution with more than 480 articles? Right? Why can't we have a constitution? At the time of independence, we can understand. Because people were not aware about their rights. There was no experience with democracy. Now, at least we have matured something, to some extent. Why can't we have a constitution which is very simple, which can be understood by every person? That is the reason why, go to any village, ask the villager, what does he know about constitution? What does he know about fundamental rights? If we read fundamental rights, as we study later, they are so complicated sentences that even one single word can completely change the entire sentence. Article 15 says that only on the basis of. If you remove only, the entire meaning of Article 15 changes. Right? So, as I said, the basic problem is that all of them are liars. And why do they make it so complicated? Why? Because if it is simple, everyone can understand. And if everyone can understand, then there will not be any liars. There are only two professions in the world who cannot see people happy and healthy. Yes, one is doctors. If you are healthy, doctor will get into depression. The more number of health problems you have, the more happier will be the doctors. And of course, other one is lawyers. If you are honest and if you don't have any cases, what will lawyers do? That is the reason why they complicate everything, to make sure that you have no option but to depend on them. This is criticism, we will definitely accept it. What are the other criticisms against our constitution? Next criticism we say is that our constitution is described as a bag of borrowed material. We have borrowed everything from all the constitutions in the world. And Ambedkar, was confronted with this criticism. What is original in our constitution? We have borrowed from all other constitutions in the world. He said that yes, we have borrowed from various sources, and said that I am not ashamed to accept that we have borrowed. Why did we borrow? He said that we have borrowed because we wanted to give the people of our country the best of the constitutions. That's why we have borrowed the best of the provisions from different constitutions. Fundamental rights we have taken from United States of America. Parliamentary democracy we have taken from British. Then emergency provisions we have taken from German constitution. And fundamental duties we have taken from Russia. Like this, we have taken so many things from different constitutions around the world. This criticism is valid, but it is also justified. It is another criticism against our constitution. What are the other criticisms against our constitution? Next criticism against our constitution is that, according to the critics, they say that our constitution reflects mostly Western liberal political ideologies. It does not have any what is called Indian spirit. Indian ethos, Indian values, Indian traditions and customs and cultures are not reflected in our constitution. It is mostly reflects the Western political philosophies, Western society, Western culture, Western values. Is this criticism valid? Yes, definitely it is valid. Because if you look at all our constitutional forefathers, the members of the Constituent Assembly, all of them were educated in UK. They were influenced by the Western liberal philosophy. The best example is fundamental rights. What is so unique about Western societies? Western societies are mostly liberal materialistic societies, which are always guided by self-interest. In those societies, people are not concerned about others. They are only concerned about themselves. They do not want any kind of compromise with their freedoms and rights. That is the reason why these fundamental rights are very important for those societies. For example, during the Corona times, in United States of America, the government wanted to impose this lockdown. People had come onto the streets, thousands and thousands of them, to protest against lockdown. They said that who is government to take away our right? Why should I sit at home just because the government is telling me? I have my right to freedom. And they celebrated what is called Corona parties. That means hundreds of people come together and partying on the streets. Corona was also very happy because it does not have to work hard. Right? They do not mind dying of Corona, but they do not like the government to impose restrictions. That is the reason why they give so much of importance to fundamental rights. Right to freedom of speech and expression, right to life and personal liberty, the right to equality. These are all the rights that they always ferociously protect and promote. On the other hand, what about Indian ethos, Indian values? In India, we say that if there is a conflict between self-interest and societal welfare, we must compromise with our self-interest. In Western countries, let the society go to hell. I am only concerned about my own interest. What happened? What is this problem? Huh? Is it class? Okay. Yoga class, okay. Okay, laughter therapy. Very good, right. So, coming back here, what the critics have said is that where is Indian spirit in our constitution? Where are Indian ethos? We talk about constitution for the people of the country, but the traditions, customs, values, cultures are not reflected. Our constitutional forefathers have also realized this. That is the reason why, towards the end, they try to make some amendments by including directive principles of state policy. And one of the most stringent criticisms against our constitution is that our constitutional forefathers have completely ignored Gandhian philosophy, Gandhian ideology. The moment we came to know that we are getting independence, Mahatma Gandhi was made completely irrelevant in our politics. Gandhi had become totally irrelevant. That is the reason why after 1935 Government of India Act, elections were held to the provinces, and in all the provinces Congress party had come to power. Most of the Congress party ministers, we are talking about 1937, they had become very corrupt when they tasted power. Gandhi was so disgusted with the working of this Congress party ministries, these ministers, that he said that the moment we get freedom, Congress party should be dissolved, disbanded. Because Congress party had come into existence only to get freedom for the country. The objective is achieved. And he said that Congress party should be converted into a cultural organization. And it should not be a political party. Congress party has taken the decision. They have disbanded Mahatma Gandhi. That is what exactly happened. So the basic problem here is that our constitutional forefathers, in fact, Ambedkar was the chairman of the drafting committee. And all of us know that there is so much of political rivalry between Gandhi and Ambedkar. And the questions have been asked also in our GS paper 1. There is so much of ideological differences. People must have the right to have differences also. Not every person can think on the same lines. And Ambedkar never liked Gandhian ideology or Gandhian philosophy. So that is the reason why if you see the entire constitution, you do not find this Gandhian ideology or Gandhian philosophy. When our constitutional forefathers towards the end realized that they did not include Gandhian philosophy, they realized that they would invite a strong criticism from the people. They tried to make amendments by including Gandhian philosophy in some of the directive principles of state policy. This is another criticism which is completely valid. Another criticism against our constitution is that critics have said that these fundamental rights in reality are not fundamental rights. They are only fundamental limitations on the rights. None of these fundamental rights are absolute. None of them are absolute. The state can always impose reasonable restrictions. And most of the time these reasonable restrictions are mostly unreasonable. The state, parliament, executive can use the power they have on the floor of the house to restrict the scope of fundamental rights with various legislations. As we have mentioned, the relation between the state and citizens is always a two-person zero-sum game. And that is the reason why since independence, any political party that had come to power always restricted the scope of fundamental rights. The first amendment to the constitution itself restricted the scope of fundamental rights, right to freedom of speech and expression. And that is the reason why it is said that these fundamental rights in reality are not rights, they are only limitations on the exercise of those rights. So these are all some of the criticisms against our constitution. All of you are already looking at into your watches impatiently, right? Right. So we can stop it here for today, and we will continue in our next class. I will take it. I will take the newspaper. And when is our next class? Okay. Tomorrow we don't have any class? Day after tomorrow? Okay, fine. It seems I have other classes, right? So, you please take a Hindu newspaper. Today's Hindu. On front page, panel of PM, CJI, LOP to pick CAC, says the court. You have to go through that article. You can mark that article so that you can read after 2,000-3,000 years, right? Please make sure that every day you are not going to sleep without reading newspapers. Very important, right? City, you can leave a city because you are already committing the crime of living in the city. More crimes need not be required. Page 3, you can leave it. Page 4, states. Not much is there, you can leave. Mostly political news you don't have to read. On page 4, you don't have to read anything. On page 5, not required. They're all political news. On page 6, just a minute, we have not completed our class. Some of you are already getting into very informal mode. Just continue with your cultural activities, stop it, right? Let us complete. On page 6, Telangana government moves the Supreme Court as a governor delays not to bills. Very important. Supreme Court turns down Andhra Pradesh play for a speedy hearing of its SLP. Special leave petition will be asked in our prelims. What is SLP? Important. Then on page 7, not much is there. Page 8 you can leave. Page 9, Metropolis, not required. On editorial page, data dissonance, second editorial is important. Policy makers must buttress domestic demand to drive growth. It is part of your economy, very important, right? Then positing India's stand on the Ukraine war, part of IR, you can read it. On page 11, the last article, the uncertain act of building trust with sources. I think you can leave it, that's not required. It's not required. Why do you want to read more? On page 12, text and context, it is about Sri Lanka. You are not writing for Sri Lankan Public Service Commission, so you can leave it. SLPSC you are not writing. Right. On page 13, you can leave it. On page 14, divisions between the West, Russia, China, derail a joint statement at a G20 meeting. You can go through that. Then India and Italy elevate ties, sign MOU on defense cooperation. India and China discuss LAC situation. That is also important. Nowadays, a good number of questions are asked. Next, they are all part of IR. Last year in your prelims, 10 questions were asked from IR out of 100. So you have to be very careful about international relations. On page 15, mostly political news you can ignore. Page 16, Supreme Court forms expert panel to probe any regulatory failure on Adani issue. Important. Then on world page, not much is there. You can leave it. On page 18, GDP growth may beat 7% this year. I hope it will not be beating us, right? It will meet 7% this year. You can go through this also. EV adoption, rising in rural India. They can be asked in your prelims, these EVs. And sports pages you can leave. right? So we will continue with our constitution in our next class.